Jamie Lannister's road to becoming a Kingsguard knight, and what he does in that position, is one of the most unique and sordid tales of any man. How someone who swore his whole existence to the protection of his king, only to betray that vow and slay the king himself, is a tale filled with questionable ideas of love, betrayal, and moral dilemmas. Here, we will see what led Jamie to revoke his oath and don the unenviable titles of Kingslayer and Oathbreaker, while somehow maintaining the ideas of chivalry. Jamie was born in 266 AC as the firstborn son of Sir Tywin Lannister and his lady wife, Joanna. Jamie was born immediately after his twin sister Cersei, holding her foot as they came into the world. King Aerys II Targaryen, being childhood friends with Jamie's father, Lord Tywin, sent both Jamie and Cersei their weight in gold as a name-day gift. Little did Aerys know how ironic this gift would prove to be. Early on, Jamie struggled heavily with reading. It quickly became obvious that the youth had a learning disability, what we now know as dyslexia. Tywin would spend hours a day with young Jamie working on his ability to read and write, an activity which Jamie would resent as his interest lay only in dogs, horses, swords, and his sister Cersei. Jamie and Cersei were inseparable in their early childhood, spending all their time together. They looked so similar as children that not even their father was able to keep them apart. Knowing this, sometimes they would dress in each other's clothes and spend a whole day as each other. They would play together in the bowels of their family's hold of Casterly Rock, where the caged lions of his late grandfather Titus were kept, daring one another to climb in. However, their relationship would evolve into more than merely the love shared by siblings, and the two became romantically involved with each other. This went on for some time, until they were caught by a servant who informed their mother. Jamie's bedchamber was immediately moved to the other side of the castle, whilst a guard was placed near Cersei's room. Joanna forbade this behavior from continuing, otherwise she would be forced to tell their father. Their mother died not long thereafter, in 273 AC, when giving birth to their younger brother, Tyrion. This caused Tywin and Cersei to despise Tyrion, which was not aided by the fact he was a dwarf and badly malformed as well. Despite this, Jamie developed an affection for his youngest sibling, and treated him with kindness and respect, causing the two to become close to one another. Shortly after Joanna's death, the Princess of Dorne visited Casterly Rock with her two youngest children, Elia and Oberyn Martell. When she eventually proposed a betrothal between Elia and Jamie, she was refused. Perhaps, if Tywin had known of Jamie and Cersei's feelings for one another at the time, and how the events would play out in the following years, he may have jumped at this opportunity instead. At the age of 11, Jamie was sent south to Crack Hall, where he was to squire for Lord Sumner Crack Hall. During this time, he was occasionally allowed to visit Casterly Rock, and more importantly to him, his sister. However, he flew into a rage when he learned that his father had sent Cersei to King's Landing in 278 AC, though there was little Jamie could do about this. Around this time, Jamie's ability as a fighter was beginning to blossom. At the age of 13, while still a squire, Jamie won his first tourney melee, besting grown men in combat. Whilst still a squire to Lord Sumner, Jamie was sent to Riverrun under the guise of delivering a message to Lord Hoster that was, quote, too important to be trusted to a raven. Unbeknownst to Jamie, Lord Hoster and his father Tywin had been considering betrothing Jamie to Hoster's younger daughter, Lysa. Jamie spent a fortnight at Riverrun, being seated next to Lysa during meals. Jamie ignored her, however, being more interested in the stories of Hoster's younger brother, Sir Brynden, a famous warrior who had fought in the War of the Ninepenny Kings, and regaled Jamie with tales of valor and heroics. At the age of 15, Jamie participated in the campaign against the Kingswood Brotherhood, an infamous outlaw organization operating out of the Kingswood. The Brotherhood gained recognition by kidnapping several nobles and evaded early attempts to capture them. Ultimately, they became such a nuisance that King Aerys himself sent a detachment of soldiers to destroy them, led by the Kingsguard knights Sir Arthur Dane and Sir Barristan Selmy. Lord Sumner Crackhall was summoned as well, bringing his squire Jamie with him. The Brotherhood was sheltered by the small folk of the Kingswood, preventing the royal forces from finding and ending the outlaws. However, Sir Arthur Dane gained the confidence of the small folk, who who had believed that the only ones protecting their rights were the Brotherhood. Arthur petitioned the king for better rights for the small folk, and he made sure the royal forces paid for any items they took from the peasantry. Arthur's actions swung the allegiance of the small folk to the royal forces, who could now hunt the Brotherhood, as the outlaws could no longer roam the forest with impunity. Once tracked down, the young Jamie, Sir Arthur, and Sir Barristan faced off against these outlaws. Sir Barristan eliminated their leader, Simone Toyne, while Jamie crossed swords with the psychotic Smiling Knight, although it was Sir Arthur who finished him. Afterwards, Jamie would regard the battle as one of his fondest memories. With the Brotherhood defeated, Jamie was knighted for the valor he had shown on the battlefield. Sir Arthur Dane held a vigil in a nearby sept, and when Arthur lightly tapped Jamie's shoulder with his sword during the ceremony, his tremendous greatsword Dawn cut clean through his tunic, causing Jamie's shoulder to bleed. Freshly knighted, Jamie was to return to Casterly Rock. He decided to stop in King's Landing en route to visit his sister, from whom he had been separated for years. There, Cersei informed him that their father, Lord Tywin, intended to betroth him to Lysa Tully, and had gone as far as inviting Lord Hoster to King's Landing to discuss the dower. Cersei suggested that Jamie become a member of the Kingsguard instead, replacing the recently deceased Sir Harlan Grandison. While this would allow him to be close with Cersei and free himself of the unwanted marriage to Lysa, this would require Jamie to give up his claim to Casterly Rock and his position as Tywin's heir. After a night of passionate love, he agreed to Cersei's plan. While the siblings expected Tywin to oppose it, Cersei claimed he could not openly object. She promised to do the rest, and a month later, Jamie received news that he had been chosen for the Kingsguard, and was to present himself to the king during the grand tourney at Harrenhal, where he would say his vows and don his white cloak. Jamie's and Cersei's plan did not entirely work as expected. Their father, furious about the king's decision, pleaded illness and resigned his position as Hand of the King, which he had been serving ably as for years. Tywin returned to Casterly Rock, taking Cersei with him, which separated the siblings once more. While the enmity between Tywin and King Aerys had been brewing for some time, we must also consider that Tywin must have known of his children's feelings for one another, and was doing all in his power to keep the two separated. Jamie was raised to the Kingsguard by its Lord Commander, Sir Gerald Hightower, in a ceremony at Harrenhal in 281 AC, making him the youngest knight ever to be raised to the order. That night, however, King Aerys soured the honor by sending him back to King's Landing to guard Queen Rhaelia and Prince Viserys, depriving Jamie of the chance to participate in Lord Walter Went's tourney. It was that moment Jamie realized that the king had only chosen him for the Kingsguard to slight Lord Tywin, of whom Aerys was insanely jealous, and to rob him of his heir. Jamie left for King's Landing at once. When a mystery knight appeared at the tourney, King Aerys became convinced that it was Jamie, who had defied his orders and secretly returned. However, the mystery knight disappeared, and nothing further came of the king's suspicions. Here we see the seeds of betrayal on all sides truly take root. While Jamie only took the position as a way to be near his sister, it was clear that Aerys had no particular respect for Jamie, and was using him as a tool to sate his jealousy of Tywin's power. We must understand that while Aerys was king, Tywin's reputation for brutal effectiveness became so well known, and so widely respected, that popular rumor held it was Tywin, not Aerys, who truly ruled the realm. Aerys' relationship with his hand had been breaking down for a long time. The pair's friendship was fraying. Where previously Aerys had heeded Tywin's counsel, in later years he often disagreed with his hand and did the opposite of what Tywin suggested. The elevation of Jamie to Kingsguard was the final disrespect that Tywin could not tolerate. It now was clear to Jamie the reality of his position. Normally being a place of high honor, Jamie felt it was a place of disrespect, and by being raised to the Kingsguard, Jamie gave up his claim to Casterly Rock, meaning now he could no longer hold lands or titles. Nonetheless, Tywin continued to regard him as his true heir, and was always angry to see Jamie dressed all in white instead of the red and gold of House Lannister. Jamie served in King Aerys' Kingsguard for 2 years, growing more and more disillusioned, witnessing the Mad King's growing insanity and his tendency for burning men alive. In 282 AC, Jamie bore witness to the burning of Brandon and Lord Rickard Stark. Rickard had demanded a trial by combat, imprisoned for the crime of conspiring to kill the Crown Prince Rhaegar after Rhaegar abducted Lyanna Stark. His request was granted. Dressed in steel armor, according to Jamie, Rickard expected to fight a member of the Kingsguard. However, King Aerys declared that fire was the champion of House Targaryen. Rickard was suspended from the rafters, and a fire was lit beneath him by the pyromancers. He was slowly cooked to death in his armor, while his son Brandon, with a Tyroshi noose around his neck and a sword just out of his reach, was made to watch his father roast. Trying to reach the sword to save him, Brandon strangled himself. Standing at the foot of the Iron Throne as the two Starks perished in agony, Jamie coped by going away inside, focusing on thoughts of Cersei instead of the events occurring in front of him. Afterwards, he was reminded by his Lord Commander, Sir Gerald Hightower, that he swore a vow to guard the king, not to judge him. This was but one of the many horrific deeds Jamie would bear witness to serving Aerys. Jamie would later advise others to go away inside, as a way to deal with a harsh reality and making an appalling task tolerable. Following the deaths of Brandon and Rickard Stark, Lord Jon Arryn refused to obey Aerys' order to send the heads of Eddard Stark and Robert Baratheon, starting the war that would become known as Robert's Rebellion. After the Battle of the Bells, it became apparent to Aerys that Robert was a serious threat to Targaryen rule. He devised a plot with the help of his chief pyromancers, which involved the placement of caches of wildfire all throughout King's Landing. The plan was to burn the entire city to the ground rather than lose it to Robert. His new hand, Lord Carlton Chelsted, eventually confronted Aerys about this plan. Failing to convince Aerys to give up this scheme, Chelsted resigned, flinging his chain of office to the floor. For that, Aerys burned him alive. As Aerys did not trust his newest addition to the Kingsguard, Jamie was kept close by and therefore heard and saw it all. Aerys grew aroused by burning people, and the night Chelsted was burned, Aerys visited the chambers of his wife. Jamie and his sworn brother, Sir Jonathor Derry, stood guard outside Queen Hralia's bedchamber while Aerys defiled her. Listening to her cries, Jamie, feeling conflicted, eventually commented to Jonathor that they were sworn to protect the queen as well. Jon replied, but not from him. Shortly after Prince Rhaegar Targaryen left the Red Keep to face the rebels on the Trident, the day the prince left, Jamie begged Rhaegar to take him along, suggesting that one of the other Kingsguard knights could remain at the king's side instead. Rhaegar refused the suggestion, admitting that King Aerys wanted to keep Jamie close as a hostage against his father, Lord Tywin. Rhaegar promised an angry and disappointed Jamie that changes would be made when he returned from the battlefield, and charged Jamie with keeping his wife, Elia Martell, and their children safe. Rhaegar would not survive to make good on that promise, as he was slain by Robert during the Battle of the Trident, while a rebel army led by Lord Eddard Stark raced towards King's Landing after Rhaegar's downfall. Lord Tywin Lannister appeared first at the gates of the capital with 12,000 men. His main concerns were that King Aerys would be capable of killing Jamie out of spite, as well as that Jamie himself would do something rash. Though Lord Varys, the Master of Whispers, counseled Aerys against opening the gates, the king instead listened to Grand Maester Pycelle, who told him that his old hand Tywin had come to his defense. As such, the city gates were open to Tywin and his army, but once inside, Tywin betrayed Aerys and began the sack of King's Landing. As the sole Kingsguard remaining in the city, the defense of the Red Keep became Jamie's responsibility. Knowing that he did not stand a chance to defend the castle, he sent a messenger to the king, asking for leave to make terms with the attackers. The messenger came back with Aerys' order that Jamie should bring him Lord Tywin's head, to prove that he was no traitor. The messenger also informed him that the pyromancer Rossart was with the king, leading Jamie to believe that Aerys was about to command the destruction of the city. Jamie killed Rossart, who was dressed as a common soldier and hurrying to a postern gate. When the king in the throne room saw the blood on Jamie's sword, he demanded to know whether it was Tywin's, renewing his command that Jamie should bring him his father's head. Otherwise, Jamie would burn with all the other traitors. When Jamie answered that it was Rossart's blood, the frightened Aerys ran towards the Iron Throne. Jamie hauled him off the steps and killed his king with a single slash across his throat, thereby preventing him from giving the command to burn the city to some other pyromancer. Lord Tywin's men, led by Sir Ellis Westerling and Lord Roland Crackhall, burst into the room in time to see that Jamie had killed the king, forestalling any chance for Jamie to steal away and let someone else claim responsibility. Jamie Jamie told them to advise all who were still fighting that the king was dead and to spare anyone who yielded. Lord Crackhall then asked whether a new king should be proclaimed as well, indicating that it could be Lord Tywin or Lord Robert Baratheon or even a new Targaryen king. Jamie mused on the possibility of choosing Viserys or Rhaegar's son, Aegon, as the new king with Tywin as his hand, but realizing that both boys shared the same blood as Aerys and thus the same propensity for madness, Jamie declared to Lord Crackhall that it was all the same to him. He then seated himself on the Iron Throne, waiting to see who would come to claim it. He was found sitting there with his golden sword across his legs when Lord Stark rode into the hall with his men to claim the throne for Robert. Jamie gave up the throne to Eddard, proclaiming it had been an uncomfortable seat. In the following days, Jamie secretly hunted down and killed the other two pyromancers involved in Aerys' wildfire plot, Bellis and Garius. Although Eddard urged Robert to strip Jamie of the White Cloak, arguing that he should at least be made to join the Night's Watch, Robert listened to Jon Arryn instead. Jamie was pardoned by King Robert, together with Varys and Pycelle, and continued to serve in the Kingsguard along with Sir Barristan Selmy. Jamie was present at Robert's coronation feast, where Robert joked about the fact that Jamie was already being called Kingslayer. He is known to himself, other Kingsguard, and as far as Winterfell and Essos by the nickname. Though reviled by the realm for his betrayal, Jamie considers the slaying of Aerys to be his finest act, his true motivation remaining unknown to the masses. This raises several questions to the motivations and morality of Jamie. Early in the Game of Thrones plotline, Jamie is painted as a brash and dishonorable man. He is given the name Kingslayer and Oathbreaker, both of which may be true, but the reality of which can only really be understood with this context. Jamie joined the Kingsguard for selfish reasons. He was slighted at every opportunity by the Mad King and used more as a hostage than a true guard. He did break his oath, but for perhaps one of the most noble causes possible. Aerys had demonstrated his sadistic and psychopathic nature. Jamie prevented a plan to destroy the city and the thousands of innocents within, at the sacrifice of his own personal reputation. Is it more noble to stick to one's vows to commit an atrocity, or to break them in an act of selflessness, even when no one will think of it as such? Jamie is an intensely complicated character, a man who cares deeply for his family and was put in a position with only bad options. Knowing this background is imperative to appreciating him in the story and understanding his actions in a Game of Thrones. He serves as a wonderful example of moral complexity, and this is reflected in his backstory. Jamie goes on to do some very despicable things, but he does not do them without reason. His actions have purpose and push the ideas of morality. George R.R. Martin gave his own thoughts on Jamie in a quote from this interview. One of the things I wanted to explore with Jamie, and with so many of the characters, is the whole issue of redemption. When can we be redeemed? Is redemption even possible? When do we forgive people? Our society is full of people who have fallen in one way or another. How many good acts make up for a bad act? I don't know the answer, but these are questions worth talking about. I want there to be a possibility of redemption for us, because we all do terrible things. We should be able to be forgiven, because if there is no possibility of redemption, what's the answer then? Jamie is a perfect touchstone to ask several questions about what is right or wrong, and the motivations behind actions that seem quite unsavory. As such, his character is deeply fascinating, as with many other characters in A Song of Ice and Fire. If you are interested in learning more about another one of these fascinating characters, check out this video on his father Tywin, and how he became the ruthlessly effective leader that he is.